All right, chapter 5 of Prince Caspian. After this, Caspian and his tutor had many more secret conversations on top of the great tower, and at each conversation Caspian learned more about old Narnia, so that thinking and dreaming about the old days and longing that they might come back nearly filled all of his spare hours. But of course he did not have very many hours to spare, for now his education was in earnest. He learned sword fighting and riding, swimming and diving, how to shoot with the bow and play on the recorder and the thoroughbow, how to hunt stag and cut him up when he was dead, besides cosmography, rhetoric, heraldry, versification, of course history, with a little law, physic, alchemy, and astronomy. Of magic he only learned theory, for Dr. Cornelius said the practical part was not properly studied for princes. And I myself am only a very imperfect magician, and only can do the smallest of experiments. Of navigation, which is a noble and heroical art, said the doctor, he was taught nothing, because King Miraz disapproved of ships and sea. He also learned a great deal by using his own eyes and ears. As a boy, he often wondered why he disliked his aunt, Queen Pruna Prisma. Now he saw it was because she disliked him. He also began to see that Narnia was an unhappy country. The taxes were high, the laws were stern, and Miraz was a very cruel man. After some years there came a time when the queen seemed to be ill, and there was a great deal of bustle and pother about her in the castle, and doctors came and courtiers whisper. It was in the early summer-time. And one night, while all this fuss was going on, Caspian was unexpectedly awakened by Dr. Cornelius after he had only been in bed a few hours. Are we going to do a little astronomy, Dr. Cornelius? Shh, said the doctor. Trust me and do exactly as I tell you. Put on all of your clothes. You have a long journey ahead of you. Caspian was very surprised, but he had learned to have confidence in his tutor, and he began to do what he was told at once. When he was dressed, the doctor said, I have a wallet for you. We must go into the next room and fill it with victuals from your highness's supper table. My gentlemen in waiting will be there, said Caspian. They are fast asleep and will not wake. I am a minor magician, but I can at least contrive a sleeping charm. They went to the chamber there, and sure enough, two gentlemen in waiting were sprawling on chairs, snoring hard. Dr. Cornelius quickly cut up the remains of a cold chicken, some slices of venison, put them with a little bread and an apple or so, and a little flask of good wine into the wallet, which he then gave to Caspian. It was fitted on by a strap over Caspian's shoulder, like a satchel you would use for taking your books to school. Do you have your sword? Yes. Then put its mantle over all to hide the sword in the wallet. That's right. And we must go to the great tower to talk. When they reached the top of the tower, it was a cloudy night, not at all like the night when they had seen the conjunction of Tarva and Anvil. Dr. Cornelius said, Dear Prince, you must leave this castle at once and go and seek your fortune in the wild world. Your life is in danger here. Why? Said Caspian. Because you are the true king of Narnia, Caspian the tenth, the true son and heir of Caspian the ninth. Long live to your majesty. And suddenly, to Caspian's great surprise, the little man dropped down on one knee and kissed his hand. What does it all mean? I don't understand. I wonder why you have never asked me before, said the doctor. Why, being the son of a King Caspian, you are not King Caspian yourself. Everyone except your majesty knows that Miraz is a usurper. When he first began to rule, he did not even pretend to be the king. He called himself Lord Protector. But then your mother died, the good queen and the only tambourine who was ever kind to me. And then, one by one, all the great lords who had known your father died or disappeared. Not by accident either. Miraz weeded them out. Belazar and Nuvalis were shot with arrows on a hunting party. By chance. It was pretended. All the great house of the Passarids were sent to fight the giants on the northern frontier, till one by one they fell. Arlian and Irmeron, and a dozen more he executed for treason on a false charge. The two brothers of Beaversdam he shut up as madmen. Then finally he persuaded the 7 noble lords, who alone with all the Talmarines did not fear the sea, to sail away and look for new lands beyond the eastern ocean. And as he intended, they never came back, and there was no one left who could speak a word for you. And then he flatters, as he instructed them, begged him to become king, and of course he did. Do you mean he wants to kill me now too? It's almost certain. But why now? I mean, why didn't he do it so long ago if he wanted to? What have I done to him? He's changed his mind about you because of something that has happened only 2 hours ago. The queen has had a son. I don't see what that's got to do with it, Caspian said. You don't see? Have all my history lessons and politics taught you nothing? Listen, as long as he had no children of his own, he was willing enough that you should be king after he died. He may not have cared much about you, but he'd rather you have the throne than a stranger. Now that he has a son of his own, he'll want his own son to be the next king. You are in the way. He'll clear you out of the way. Is he really that bad? Would he really murder me? He murdered your father, said Dr. Cornelius. Caspian felt very odd and didn't say anything. I can tell you the whole story, said Dr. Cornelius, but not now. There is no time. You must fly at once. Will you come with me? Said the Caspian. I will not, said the doctor. It would make your danger greater. Two are easily more tracked than one, dear prince. Dear King Caspian, you must be very brave. You must go on alone and at once. Try and get across the southern border to the court of King Nain in Archenland. He will be good to you. Shall I ever see you again? Said Caspian in a quavering voice. I hope so, dear king. What friend have I in the world except your majesty? I have a little magic, but in the meantime, speed is everything. Here are two gifts before you go. This is a little purse of gold. Alas, all the treasure in this castle should be yours by right, but here's something far better. In his hand, he put something in Caspian's hand, which he could hardly see, but he knew to be the feel of a horn. That is the greatest and most sacred treasure of Narnia. Many terrors I endured, many spells I did utter to find it when I was still young. It is the magic horn of Queen Susan herself, which she left behind when she vanished from Narnia at the end of the Golden Age. It is said whoever blows it shall have strange help. No one can say how strange. It may have the power to call Queen Lucy, King Edmund, Queen Susan, and High King Peter back from the past, and they will set all right. And maybe that it will call Basil himself. Take it, King Caspian, but do not use it except at your greatest need. And now, haste, haste. The little door on the very bottom of the tower. The door into the garden is unlocked. There we must part. Can I get my horse dressed, sir? Asked Caspian. He is already saddled and waiting for you in the corner of an orchard. During the long climb down the winding staircase, Cornelius whispered many more words of direction and advice. Caspian's heart was sinking. He tried to take it all in. Then came the fresh air in the garden, the fervent hand clasp with the doctor, run across the lawn, a welcomely whinnying from the horse, and King Caspian the Tenth left the castle of his fathers. Looking back, he saw fireworks going up to celebrate the birth of the new prince. Excuse me. All that night he rode southward, choosing byways and bridle paths and woods as long as he was in the country that he knew, but afterward he kept to the high road. Drescher was excited as the master at the unusual journey, and Caspian, though tears had come to his eyes at saying goodbye to Dr. Cornelius, felt brave and in a way happy to think that he was King Caspian riding to seek adventures, with his sword on his hip and Queen Susan's magic horn on his right. But when the day came, a sprinkle of rain, he looked about him and saw on every side unknown woods, wild heaths, blue mountains. He thought how large and strange the world was, and how frightened and small. As soon as it was full daylight, he left the road and found an open grassy place amid a wood where he could rest. He took off Drescher's bridle and let him graze, ate some cold chicken, and presently fell asleep. It was late in the afternoon when he awoke. He ate a morsel and continued his journey, still southward, by many unfrequented lanes. He was now in the land of hills, going up and down, but always more up than down. From every ridge he could see mountains growing bigger and blacker ahead. As the evening closed in, he was riding their lower slopes. The wind rose, soon the rain fell in torrents. Drescher came uneasy, there was thunder in the air, and now they entered a dark and seemingly empty pine forest. And all the stories Caspian had ever heard of trees being unfriendly to man crowded in his mind. He remembered he was, after all, a Telmarine of the race who cut down trees wherever they could and were at war with all wild things. Though he himself might be unlike other Telmarines, the trees could not be expected to know this. Nor did they. The wind came at tempest, the woods roared and creaked all around him. There came a crash. A tree fell right across the road and behind him. Quiet, Drescher, quiet, said Caspian, patting his horse's neck. But he was trembling himself and knew he had escaped death by an inch. Lightning flashed and a great crack of thunder seemed to break the sky in two just overhead. Drescher bolted in good earnest. Caspian was a good rider, but he had not the strength to hold him back. He kept his seat. He knew his life hung by a thread during the wild career that followed. Tree after tree rose up before them in the dusk, and was only just avoided. Then almost too suddenly, yet it did hurt him too. Something struck Caspian on the forehead, and he did not know any more. When he came to himself, he was lying in a firelit place with bruised limbs and a bad headache, and low voices were speaking close at hand. And now, said one, before it wakes up, we must decide what to do with it. Kill it, said another. We can't let it live. It would betray us. We ought to have killed it at once, or else left it alone, said a third voice. We can't kill it now, not after we've taken it and bandaged its head and all. It would be murdering a guest. Gentlemen, said Caspian in a feeble voice, whatever you do to me, I hope you will be kind to my poor horse. Your horse had taken flight long before we found you, said the first voice, a curiously husky, earthy voice, as Caspian now noticed. Now don't let it talk you around with its pretty words, said the second voice. I still say horns and halibuts, exclaimed the third voice. Of course we're not going to murder it. For shame, Nickelbrick. What do you say, Truffle Hunter? What shall we do with it? I shall give it a drink, said the first voice, presumably Truffle Hunter's. A dark shape approached the bed. Caspian felt an arm slipped gently under his shoulders. It was exactly an arm. The shape was somehow seemed wrong. The face had been bent toward him, seemed wrong, too. He got the impression that it was very hairy and very long nosed. There were odd white patches on the side of it. It's a mask of some sort, thought Caspian, or perhaps I have a fever and imagining it all. A cupful of something sweet was and hot was set to its lips as he drank. That moment one of the others poked the fire. A blaze sprang up, and Caspian almost screamed at the shock as the sudden light revealed the face that was looking into his own. It was not a man's face, but a badger's, though larger and friendlier and more intelligent than the face of any badger he had seen before, and it certainly had been talking. He saw, too, he was on a bed of heather in a cave. By the fire sat two little bearded men, so much wilder and shorter and hairier and thicker then Dr. Cornelius. He knew them at once for real dwarfs, ancient dwarfs with not a drop of human blood in their veins, and Caspian knew at last he had found the old Narnians, and his head began to swim again. For the next few days he learned how to know them by names. The badger was Truffle Hunter. He was the oldest and kindest of the three. The dwarf who wanted to kill Caspian was a sour dwarf. That is, his hair and his beard were black and thick like horsehair. His name was Nickabrick. And the other dwarf was a red dwarf with hair rather like a fox's, and he was called Trumpkin. And now, said Nickabrick the first evening, when Caspian was well enough to sit up and talk, we have still to decide what to do with this human. You two think you have done it a great kindness by not letting me kill it, but I suppose the upshot is we have to keep it a prisoner for life. I'm certainly not going to let it go alive, to go back to its own and betray us all. Bulbs and bolsters, Nickabrick, said Trumpkin. Why do you need to talk so unhandsomely? It isn't the creature's fault it bashed its head against a tree outside of our hole, and I don't think it looks like a traitor. I say, you haven't found out whether I want to go back. I don't. I want to stay with you if you'll let me. I've been looking for people like you all my life. That's a likely story, growled Nickelbrick. You're a Telmarine and a human, aren't you? Of course you want to go back to your own time. Kind. Well, even if I did, I couldn't. I was flying for my life when I had an accident. The king wants to kill me. If you'd kill me, you'd do everything. You've pleased him. Well, now, you don't say so, eh? What's that? Said Trumpkin. What have you been doing, human, to fall the foul of Miraz at your age? He's my uncle, began Caspian, when Nickabrick jumped up with the dagger. There you are, not only a tambourine, but a close kin and heir to our greatest enemy. Are you still crazy enough to let this creature live? He could have stabbed Caspian then and there if the badger and Trumpkin had not got in the way and forced him to sit back down. Now, once and for all, Nickabrick, said Trumpkin, will you contain yourself, or must Truffle Hunter and I sit on your head? Nickabrick sulkily promised to behave, and the other two asked Caspian to tell his story. When he had done, there was a moment's silence. That is the oddest thing I've ever heard, said Trumpkin. I don't like it, said Nickabrick. I didn't know there were stories about us still being told among the humans. The less they know about us, the better. That old nurse now, she better have held her tongue. It's all mixed up with that tutor, a renegade dwarf. I hate him. I hate him worse than the humans. You mark my word, no good will ever come of it. Don't go talking about things you don't understand, Nickabrick, said Truffle Hunter. You dwarfs are forgetful and unchangeable as humans themselves. I am a beast, I am, and a badger what's more. We don't change, we hold on. I say great good will come of it. This is the true king of Narnia we've got here. A true king, coming back to true Narnia. And if we beasts remember, even if dwarfs forget, that Narnia was never right except for when a son of Adam was king. Whistles and whirligigs, Truffle Hunter, said Trumpkins. You don't mean you want to give the country to humans. I said nothing of that, said the badger. It's not men's country. Who should know that better than me? But a country for a man to be king of. We badgers have long enough memories to know. Why, bless us all, wasn't the High King Peter a man? Do you believe all those stories? Asked Trumpkin. I tell you, we don't change, we beasts, said Truffle Hunter. We don't forget. We believe in High King Peter and the rest that reigned at Carparabel as firmly as I believe in Aslan himself. As firmly as that, I dare say, said Trumpkin. But who believes in Aslan now any days? I do. If I hadn't believed in him before, I would now. Back among the humans, people laughed at Aslan, and who would have laughed at stories of talking beasts and dwarfs? Sometimes I wonder if there really was such a person as Aslan, but then sometimes I wonder if there were really people like you, and yet here you are. That's right, said Trouble Hunter. You are right, King Caspian. As long as you will be true to old Narnia, you shall be my king, whatever they say. Long live to your majesty. You make me sick, Badger, growled Nickabrick. The High King Peter and the rest may have been men, but they were a different sort of men. This is one of the cursed Telmarines. He has haunted beasts for sport, haven't you? He added, rounding on Caspian suddenly. Well, the truth to tell you, I have, said Caspian, but they weren't talking beasts. It's all the same, said Knickerbocker. No, 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 Truffle Hunter said. You know it isn't. You know very well that the beasts in Narnia nowadays are different and no more dumb, witless creatures you'd find at Calormwyn or Telmar. They're smaller, too. They're far more different from us than the half-dwarfs are from you. There was a great deal more talk, but it all ended with the agreement that Caspian should stay, even the promise that, as soon as he was able to go out, he would be taken to see what Trumpkin called the others, for apparently in the wild parts all sorts of creatures from the old days of Narnia still lived on in hiding.